Good evening. Welcome back to Night Veins. Tonight we venture deep into the frozen heart of Alaska, where even the silence can betray you. Imagine this. You're trapped in a remote room during a brutal snowstorm. The wind is howling like something alive, walls trembling, and your phone vibrates with a sudden weather alert. Only, this one's different. It doesn't warn you about temperatures or road closures. It says, do not leave your room under any circumstances. What do you do when the only warning you receive sounds like it came from something watching you? You're about to find out. If you're ready for another true-style nightmare, subscribe to Night Veins, because the dark doesn't just whisper, it warns. Now dim your lights, put on your headphones, and let the storm begin. The alert didn't come from the radio, the TV, or even my phone. It came from the thermostat on the wall, an old digital unit bolted above the heater in my tiny rental cabin near Palmer, Alaska. At 1:16 a.m., it lit up with a soft mechanical beep, and a red message started scrolling across the tiny screen. Severe weather. Warning, do not leave room. Danger outside. At first, I laughed. I thought it was some kind of prank. I had rented the place online for a solo weekend escape. Cheap rates, middle of nowhere, perfect for disconnecting. The cabin was clean but old. Bare bones, rustic, no front desk, no staff, just a lockbox key, Wi-Fi that barely worked, and a printed map of the hiking trails nearby. The thermostat wasn't even connected to the internet. I stood up from the couch, walked over, and stared at the glowing message. It scrolled again. Same line. No buttons to press, no way to clear it. It just blinked silently under the fluorescent light of the ceiling fan. I pulled out my phone. No new notifications, no app alert. The weather app showed clear skies, 20 sektor, light wind. I turned the thermostat off. 10 seconds later, it turned itself back on. Do not leave room. I was already creeped out, but not enough to panic. I figured maybe some local survivalist rigged the thermostat with a weird emergency signal. Maybe there was a bear spotted nearby. Maybe it was just an old system glitching in the cold. But then, something tapped on the door. Not a knock, just a tap. Single. Sharp, deliberate. I froze in place. My cabin was remote, far enough from the main road that I had to park in a clearing and hike half a mile uphill with a flashlight to get here. No neighbors for miles, no marked paths. Nothing but snow, trees, and silence. Nobody should be out there. I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. No one. Not even tracks in the snow. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to convince myself I imagined it. I turned away, and there it was again. Tap. Not at the door this time, at the window. My stomach dropped. The window faced the back of the cabin, the side covered in trees and deep snow. I hadn't opened it since arriving. The curtains were drawn halfway. I didn't move. The thermostat beeped again. This time, the message had changed. Do not approach windows. Do not respond to knocking. I backed up slowly, heart pounding now. I grabbed my phone, flicked the flashlight on, and scanned the room. Everything looked normal. Stove, sink, bunk bed, a lantern on the table. Nothing unusual. But I could feel something. That quiet pressure in your skull when you're not alone. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady my breathing. The wind picked up outside, rattling the roof a little. A soft creaking sound came from the porch, like a boot on old wood. But I didn't look this time. I stayed seated. My muscles were tense enough to snap. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. No more knocking. No more beeping. Just cold silence. I tried playing music on my phone to distract myself. It wouldn't load, no service, no downloads, just a spinning buffer icon and the flicker of dying signal. Then the thermostat lit up again. Whatever is outside can mimic voices. Do not believe what you hear. And just as I read it, someone whispered right outside the window, "Hey, it's me. Can you let me in?" It was my voice. It was unmistakably my own voice, calm, pleading, slightly confused. "It's me." I locked myself out. "Come on, man, open the door." I didn't move. I couldn't. My body was frozen in place, but not from the cold, from the wrongness. I knew what my voice sounded like. I had heard it on voicemails, in home videos, in echoey recordings from old college projects, and whatever was outside the window had nailed it. But it was off by just enough to send shivers down my spine, like an AI that hadn't fully figured out human warmth. "I know you're in there," it said again. "Please, let me in." I stayed perfectly still on the edge of the bed. The thermostat beeped once more. This time the message read, "Do not engage. Do not speak. Stay silent until sunrise." My hands were trembling. I turned the brightness on my phone all the way down and opened the camera app. Quietly, I angled it toward the window and zoomed in through the half-drawn curtain. Nothing. Just snow. Just trees. But the voice was still there. "You dropped your flashlight outside. You'll need it when the power cuts." I never dropped my flashlight. I still had it, right next to me on the bed. That's when it hit me. It was trying to lure me out. I crawled off the bed and turned off every light. Total darkness. The only illumination came from the soft red glow of the thermostat, which now read, "Motion detected at door." The door handle jiggled. I bit my fist to stop myself from screaming. Then, 3 loud knocks. This time, no hesitation, like a person growing impatient. A few seconds later, the knob began to turn back and forth, aggressively. And then, the voice changed. It was still me, but different now. Hollow, angry, glitching, like a skipping record. Let mine. I dropped to the floor and crawled to the kitchen area. My backpack was still by the fridge. I pulled out my pocket knife, not much, but better than nothing, and backed into the farthest corner. Suddenly, everything went quiet. No knocks, no voice. The wind outside died, and the cabin was wrapped in suffocating silence. Until the TV turned on. Static. I hadn't touched the remote. I hadn't even turned it on since I got there. The thermostat lit up in sync with the TV, now scrolling a different message. "It is inside." I dropped the knife. I was inside. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the hallway that led to the bathroom. There was a shadow, tall, slender, standing just around the corner, perfectly still. I couldn't make out the face, but I saw the faint reflection of light in its eyes. It was me, or something wearing me, and it was smiling. I scrambled backward, knocking over a chair, and the TV cut off mid-static. The thermostat screen went black. Everything went dead. The shadow didn't move. I fumbled for the flashlight and clicked it on. When the beam hit the hallway, there was nothing there. No shadow. No figure. I swept the cabin top to bottom. Every closet, every cabinet, the attic hatch, nothing but the front door. It was unlocked. I know I had locked it. I triple-checked it before I sat down earlier. The deadbolt, the chain, everything. And now it stood slightly ajar, creaking ever so softly with the breeze. I didn't dare go near it. Instead, I pushed the kitchen table against it, dragged the dresser in front of that, and sat on the floor, with the knife clutched in my hand. I stared at the thermostat, willing it to come back to life. At some point, I must have blacked out. I woke up to daylight bleeding through the windows and birds chirping faintly in the trees outside. The thermostat was off. The TV was off. Everything was normal. I hesitantly opened the front door. Snow covered the porch. No tracks. No sign that anyone or anything had been there. I stepped outside for the first time in hours, phone in hand, ready to sprint back to my car if I saw anything move. That's when I saw the sign, nailed to the pine tree at the bottom of the hill. Warning, this cabin is under test conditions. Do not interfere with subject. Monitoring in progress. There was no logo, no government seal, no explanation, just black stenciled letters and a rusted nail. I packed my bags in 5 minutes flat and bolted. As I started driving down the trail, I glanced in the rearview mirror. There was someone standing at the cabin window, watching me leave, wearing my face. The first sign something was wrong came from my dog, not me. It was barely 3 p.m., but the sky was already turning dark, the kind of premature dusk that only happens in the Alaskan winter. We were deep in the forest behind my uncle's cabin, near Wrangell St. Elias, miles from any main road, and I had taken Buddy, my golden retriever, out for a quick walk before the storm rolled in. But the moment we reached a clearing about half a mile in, Buddy stopped cold. He didn't sniff around, didn't bark, didn't wag, he just froze, completely still, ears perked, eyes locked straight ahead. At first I thought maybe he spotted a moose or bear in the trees, so I followed his gaze. Nothing, just dark pines and the fading trail ahead. But he wouldn't budge. "Come on, Bud." I tugged lightly at the leash. "Let's go." Nothing. He didn't even flinch. That's when I noticed something else. The forest had gone silent. No birds, no wind, not even the crunch of distant snow. Just that eerie, thick silence that presses on your ears like underwater pressure. I crouched next to Buddy and waved a hand in front of his face. Still nothing. His body was rigid, not shaking, not whimpering, just locked in place like he was staring at something I couldn't see. His pupils were wide and I could feel his heart pounding when I touched his side. Okay, we're going back," I said, trying to hide my growing panic. But when I tugged harder, Buddy snarled, not at me, at the forest. It was low, guttural, a warning. I looked again in the direction he was focused on, but the tree line was just a blur of grays and black shadows. No movement, no animals, but the hairs on my neck stood straight up. I didn't want to run, not in case it was a bear, but I slowly backed up, tugging the leash gently. Buddy didn't move. "Buddy," I whispered more firmly now. His legs stayed planted, but his head slowly, very slowly began to tilt sideways. His lip curled slightly, not in a snarl anymore, but in what looked almost like confusion. Then his eyes darted left. Mine followed instantly, and that's when I saw it. A figure, just barely visible between the trees. Not moving, no face, no clear body. Just the shape of a person standing in the shadows, so still it could have been part of the woods if I hadn't looked exactly where Buddy led me. It was watching us. I know it was. It didn't move, didn't blink, didn't make a sound. I blinked, and for a half-second it was gone. When I blinked again, it was back, but closer. Only 10 feet closer, but enough that I was sure this wasn't just my imagination. My body instinctively backed, up further, yanking the leash. That time, Buddy growled without looking away. The figure moved again, closer. No footsteps, no crunching snow, just a shift. I panicked and scooped Buddy up. He was stiff in my arms, but thank God he didn't fight me. I turned around and started running, full sprint toward the cabin. My boots slipped twice, nearly sending me face first into the frozen trail, but adrenaline kept me upright. I didn't stop until I saw the back porch light flick on through the trees. Only when I reached the steps did I set Buddy down. He turned immediately, staring back at the woods. I turned with him. Nothing, just the Same still trees, the same dark quiet. But Buddy refused to go inside. He sat at the edge of the porch, tail down, still staring. I poured myself a drink to calm down and tried to forget it. Maybe a trick of the light, maybe a hunter in camo, though there weren't supposed to be any this far out. But when I looked again, Buddy hadn't moved. An hour passed. Then 2, then 3. Still sitting, still staring at that exact same spot in the forest. It wasn't until 11 p.m., when the wind picked up hard enough to shake the shutters, that I finally coaxed him inside. He walked backwards through the door, never turning away from the trees. That night, he wouldn't sleep. Every sound, every creak, every gust of wind made him growl low under his breath. And every time I looked out the window, I swore I saw something just past the tree line. Something watching, something waiting. The next morning, I woke up to Buddy barking. Not his usual bark, the playful yelp he gave when someone knocked or when squirrels darted by. This one was different, desperate, sharp, repetitive. It was still dark out, maybe 5:30 a.m. I stumbled to the window, heart pounding, and pulled the curtain back. Buddy was at the window, not barking at it but looking past it. He was fixated on the forest again. Same direction, same spot. That's when I noticed something in the snow. Footprints, coming from the woods. Not animal prints, human. Barefoot, dozens of them, leading from the tree line to just a few feet in front of the cabin. The spacing was strange, erratic. Some far apart like the person had lunged or skipped, others close together like they'd been standing still for a long time. I didn't hear anyone, didn't see anyone, didn't want to see anyone. I locked every window, every door, even the crawlspace hatch. Then I made coffee, but my hands were shaking so badly I spilled most of it trying to pour. Buddy wouldn't eat. He just kept pacing from the front door to the window, back and forth, stopping only to stare at that cursed spot between the trees. By noon, the wind died down. I finally worked up the courage to go outside and check the prints up close. They were real, deep, cold, fresh. But they weren't just coming from the forest. They led back in, like whoever or whatever had come out had returned the same way. But one thing chilled me more than the rest. There were no return steps, just one trail in, none going out, as if whatever came near the cabin never left. That night, I left a flashlight on the porch and kept Buddy inside. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch gripping the fire poker, staring out the window. Nothing moved until 2:14 a.m. The porch light flickered once, twice, then went out. Buddy started growling again, this time deeper. His body tensed like before, but instead of the window he stared at the front door. I heard it, the creak of a footstep on the porch. I held my breath. Another step. Then silence. Then a knock, 3 slow knocks. Deliberate. Measured. Buddy bolted to the door, snarling like a beast. I grabbed the fire poker tighter. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold it straight. Another knock. Slower this time. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then, nothing. No footsteps walking away. No voice. No more knocking. Just silence. I stood there for nearly an hour, staring at the door, waiting for something, anything, to happen. When the sun rose, I opened the door. No one, just the flashlight, and next to it, a dead bird, frozen solid, wings spread wide, eyes gone, and, next to that, a single bare footprint. Still steaming, I called the ranger station, gave them some half-baked excuse about suspicious movement near my cabin, and asked if anyone was reported missing in the area. No, the man said, but we've gotten a lot of strange calls from out that way lately. Equipment malfunctions, flickering lights, pets acting weird. Could just be the time of year. Could be, but I wasn't buying it. 2 nights later, I made the decision to leave. I packed fast, loaded Buddy in the truck, and didn't look back. But as I was turning onto the snow-covered road that led away from the cabin, Buddy let out a low whine. I glanced in the rearview mirror. And I swear, someone was standing on the porch, not waving, not moving, just watching. Face blurred, shoulders hunched, barefoot in the snow. I didn't stop. I didn't go back. But sometimes, especially late at night, I still catch Buddy staring out my apartment. Window, same direction, same angle. Like he's looking through the wall, back toward the forest. And I can't help but wonder, whatever was there, is it still waiting, or worse, did it follow us home? I hadn't told anyone about the dream because I hadn't had it yet. That's what made his words so impossible to explain. The man at the gas station didn't ask how I was, or if I needed help. He didn't even look surprised to see someone pumping gas at 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. Instead, he tilted his head at me, smiled just a little too wide, and said, "Don't worry. The dream with the hallway doesn't end like you think." I froze mid-pump, the bitter cold suddenly distant compared to the pressure building in my ears. "What?" I asked, my voice shaky. He didn't answer. He just nodded, like he'd said something helpful, and turned around, vanishing behind the closed door of the gas station as if it had swallowed him. I stared at the glass for a solid 30 seconds, waiting for him to come back out. He never did. The drive back to the cabin was supposed to be quiet. I had taken a solo trip to this part of Alaska for that exact reason, to disconnect, to clear my head after everything that had happened back home. No people, no noise, no distractions. I wanted silence, but now I couldn't stop replaying his words. There was no dream, not yet. I hadn't dreamt of any hallway. I hadn't even slept properly since arriving 3 days ago. The isolation made it hard to relax, especially with the power going in and out every time the wind howled. Still, nothing in those 3 days felt nearly as wrong as what that stranger had just said. I got back to the cabin around 2:40 a.m. The trees bent under the weight of the wind, snow curling off their branches like smoke. My boots crunched across the porch, echoing too loudly in the stillness. I looked around before unlocking the door. Habit, maybe, or maybe because I suddenly didn't trust anything anymore. The interior was the same as I left it. Small, wooden. Walls, fireplace barely holding its heat, one dim bulb that flickered when I turned it on. My phone had no signal. Expected. I set it down, undressed, and crawled into bed. That's when the dream began. At first, I didn't realize it was a dream. Everything felt too real. I was back at the gas station, but the windows were blacked out and the air smelled burnt. I turned to leave, but the world outside the door wasn't the snowy Alaskan road. It was a hallway. Long. Too long. The walls were lined with cabin doors, all slightly ajar. I walked, heart pounding, trying to figure out where I was or how I'd gotten there. The silence wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. Each door I passed creaked open a little more. None of them revealed anything. Just darkness. No light, no shape, nothing. Just empty, as if the rooms had been waiting too long. Halfway through the hallway, I heard it. My voice. Not someone like me. My exact voice. "She's getting close," it whispered. I turned fast, but no one was behind me. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions now, with no start and no end. "She's getting close," it repeated, now from inside one of the rooms. I backed away, trying to find an exit, a sign, anything. But the floor beneath my feet felt soft, suddenly, like I was standing on soaked wood. I looked down. Bloody footprints, my own. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the room pitch dark. The power was out again. My breath fogged the cold air and I struggled to pull my thoughts, together. But before I could move, I heard a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Calm. Measured. I didn't move. Not for minutes. Not even when the knocks came again. 4 this time. I whispered to myself, it was just a dream. But then I looked down. The floor in front of the bed, still wet, a trail of water leading from the door, and I was still wearing my boots. I didn't remember putting the boots back on. I didn't even remember getting out of bed. My head spun as I stared at the trail leading from the cabin door to the edge of my bed, my soaked footprints trailing across the wooden floor. The knock didn't come again. I stood slowly, heart pounding, and peeled off the wet boots. My socks were soaked. I walked to the door, not to open it, but to listen. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining for any hint of breath, snow, voice, anything. Nothing. I stepped back and dragged the dresser in front of the door. By the time daylight crept through the frozen windows, I hadn't slept a second. The power flickered back to life around 7 a.m., the heater wheezing with effort. I turned on every light and checked my phone. Still no service. I opened the camera app and scrolled back to last night, just in case. 1 new photo. Time stamped. At 3:12 a.m., it was the hallway from my dream. Long, empty. Cabin doors cracked open on both sides, but I'd never taken that photo. I stared at it, hands shaking. I had no apps, no AI image tools, nothing installed that could have generated that. My camera didn't even work well in low light. Yet here it was, perfectly centered, crystal clear. I got in my truck by 8 a.m. and drove straight back to the gas station where I'd met the stranger. This time, the place was locked. A "closed for season" sign taped to the glass. I peered inside, hands cupped around my face. Nothing, no lights, no movement, no trace of the man from last night, but written on the dust of the counter. 6 words etched with a finger. Don't sleep. It's almost real now. I backed away fast, jumped into the truck, and peeled out onto the icy road. I didn't stop until I hit the next town, hours later. There, I checked into a motel, stayed up all night under full lights, both TVs blaring, phone charging by the bed. And still, I dreamed. The hallway again. This time, I saw myself at the far end, sitting on the floor, head tilted sideways like I'd broken my neck. My eyes were open, mouth moving. Just let her finish, my own voice said. She's almost there. I screamed myself awake. Every motel I stayed at afterward, same dream, same hallway, same doors. It's been weeks. Now, I've switched cities, booked flights, seen a psychiatrist, thrown away my phone, burned the clothes I wore in Alaska. None of it helped. Because now, even when I'm awake, I see flashes of the hallway. On billboards, in reflections, on the inside of my eyelids when I blink too long, and worst of all, last night when I tried to record a voice memo explaining everything. I played it back, and my voice wasn't mine. It whispered, "She's already dreaming. You're just catching up." It was 2:43 a.m. when my CB radio crackled to life with a broadcast from a town that doesn't exist. I was hauling a load of lumber through central Alaska just south of Fairbanks when the signal broke through the static like a knife through skin. I nearly jumped. There wasn't a single car behind or ahead of me for miles, and I hadn't touched the radio since talk. Repeat, this is a Level 4 emergency alert from Whittick Township. All residents must shelter in place. Do not engage with voices outside. Do not respond to knocks. Emergency services are en route. Stay inside. The voice was male, calm, monotone, but not robotic. It sounded live. My eyes flicked to the signal meter. It was barely twitching, but the broadcast came in clear. No background noise. Just that strange message, followed by silence and a long, shrill beep that pulsed every few seconds. I turned the volume down and pulled over. There's no Whittick Township in Alaska. I've driven through nearly every speck on the map. My truck GPS didn't list it. My phone, useless out here with no bars, was no help either. Another burst came through. Repeat. If you are hearing this, you are within broadcast range of Whittick Township. Do not open your doors. Do not acknowledge any relatives who appear unannounced. They are not who they say they are. Emergency services have been delayed. Remain where you are. My stomach turned. This wasn't a test. The voice sounded off, like he was reading it for the 100th time and had stopped understanding the words. I sat there, parked under a sheet of stars with only the heater and headlights pushing back the cold. Nothing around but trees, snow, and black silence. I'd pulled over on a tight stretch of road without another vehicle in sight. I flipped to another frequency. Static. Another. More static. But when I turned the knob slowly back to the original signal, the voice was still talking. Do not look outside after 3 a.m. Avoid all reflective surfaces. Windows are no longer safe. Stay in the center of your shelter and do not sleep until further notice. I stared at the dash clock. 2:56 a.m. This was wrong. Not just eerie. Wrong in that low-level biological way that your body reacts to before your mind even catches up. Something inside me screamed, "Leave. Now." So I did. I threw the truck into gear and peeled out onto the road, radio still buzzing, with the shrill emergency tone in the background. By the time I passed the next mile marker, the signal had faded. I exhaled. My heart had been pounding the whole time, knuckles white on the wheel. Then I saw the sign, Whittick Township. 2 milesy slammed the brakes so hard the truck fishtailed. That sign hadn't been on any route plan. It wasn't in the logs. I checked. My GPS again. Nothing. No town listed ahead, just forest. But the green roadside sign was new, clean. Not a speck of snow on it, even though everything else around was half buried. My headlights caught a turnoff just ahead. A narrow snow-covered road led into thick woods, and the faded outline of a welcome sign stood just inside the trees. I should have kept going, but something about that broadcast. It didn't sound like a warning to keep out. It sounded like a cry from someone trapped inside. So I turned. The road was narrower than I expected. Too narrow for a truck like mine. Branches scraped along the sides, and snow pelted the windshield so hard I had to slow to a crawl. Every few hundred feet, the trees seemed to lean in closer. I never saw another sign for Whittick. No lights, no buildings. Just a clearing that opened into what looked like an abandoned main street. Wooden buildings, a gas station, and a general store with a broken sign swaying in the wind. But every window glowed faintly orange. I parked and killed the engine. The snowstorm stopped instantly. Not gradually, instantly, like it had been cut off. The air was silent. No wind, no birds. No sound from the buildings. Then the radio crackled again. "This is Whittick Township Emergency Broadcast System. Shelter breach reported. Do not engage. Do not look at your reflection." I turned toward the radio. Off. I hadn't powered it. Back on. The general store's door creaked open. I got out, boots crunching in the shallow snow. Everything felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. Inside the store, the shelves were fully stocked. Labels from decades ago, untouched. A small radio sat on the counter, its cord dragging toward the back. As I stepped forward, the door shut behind me on its own. I checked my phone. Dead. I was about to turn and leave when I saw it, a mirror on the far wall. Cracked, but in the reflection, I wasn't alone. A man stood behind me, not moving, wearing my clothes, my build, my face. I spun around. Nothing there. Back to the mirror, still standing behind me. Closer now, the emergency broadcast came on again, not from the radio this time, but from somewhere inside the walls. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. Do not speak to it. Do not accept help. It is not a rescue. I ran. Out the store, across the snow. No footprints behind me. Back in the truck, I locked the doors and started the engine. The dashboard clock flashed 3:00 a.m. The rearview mirror showed something sitting in the passenger seat. I refused to turn. I drove blind for 10 minutes, straight down a road that hadn't been there before, lined with identical cabins, each one flickering with orange light, faces in every window, watching. When I looked again, the passenger seat was empty. The road spat me back out onto the highway like nothing had happened. GPS returned. Snow fell again. The emergency signal was gone. But when I stopped in Fairbanks and asked the locals if they'd ever heard of Whittick Township, their reactions were all the same. Blank stares. Then a pause. Then that same sentence from different mouths. That place burned down in '82. No one goes there now. I never told them what I saw, but every now and then, when I drive late, far from cities, my radio picks up static again, and underneath the hiss, I hear my own voice whispering, "Shelter breach reported. Do not look at your reflection." I swear I saw someone move behind the frosted window, but when I looked again, the ranger station was empty. I was supposed to be alone. It was late October when I drove into the remote Alaskan backcountry, a 3-hour haul from the nearest town, and another 20 minutes off the main road into the mountains. I was chasing solitude, photography, wildlife, quiet, but what I found felt like something waiting. The check-in process was simple. The ranger, an older man named Weller with deep creases in his face and a stiffness in his voice, scribbled something in a giant leather-bound logbook and handed me a worn key with a red tag. Cabin 4. He didn't say much, just pointed at the trail, mentioned the generator hours, and warned me about storms. As I turned to leave, he said something I didn't catch the first time. "Be sure you check out." I looked back. Sorry? He didn't repeat it, just stood in the doorway, watching me disappear into the trees. The cabins were old government-issue lodges built in the '70s. Bare bones, no Wi-Fi, and barely enough power to keep the lights on. But it was perfect for me. Miles of untouched nature. No emails, no phone service. Just a week to reset. That first night, I slept like a rock. But when I woke the next morning and stepped outside to grab firewood, I noticed something off. Cabin 3, the one next to mine, had its curtains drawn. The ranger said I was the only guest this week. I remembered that clearly. I knocked on the door just once, half curious, half annoyed. No answer. I shrugged it off and took my camera into the woods. The day was quiet. No bears, no elk, just me, miles of snow-dusted trails, and the strange feeling of being followed. I kept hearing what sounded like another set of steps, just a beat behind mine, stopping every time I turned. That night, I slept with my boots on. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was a fox, or the wind echoing through the pines. But when I returned from a long hike on day 3, I found something on my cabin porch that stopped me cold. My name, carved into the wooden step. Not scratched. Carved, deep and neat, like someone took their time. I stormed back to the ranger station. Weller wasn't there. The place was locked, lights off, and looked like no one had been inside for days. I banged on the door, looked in the window, nothing. That night I saw movement again in the other cabin. I stayed up, lights off, peeking through the slats in my window. Around 2:30 a.m., I spotted a figure standing on the porch of cabin 3, not moving, just staring straight ahead. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I hiked straight to the trailhead to leave. I'd had enough. When I reached the ranger station, Weller was there, acting like nothing was wrong. I told him someone was in cabin 3, that someone had carved my name into my porch, that I wanted to check out immediately. His face didn't change. "You already did," he said. I blinked. "What?" "You checked out 2 days ago. I even signed the log myself." He turned the logbook around. There it was. My name, written in the same ink as when I checked in, signed out on Tuesday. But that was impossible. I was in the woods all day Tuesday, and I had the cabin key with me the whole time. "That's not my handwriting," I said quietly. Weller shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You're not in the system anymore. Technically, you're already gone." I backed away. "This is insane. Take care now," he said without looking at me again. "Storm's rolling in tonight. I should have left right then. I should have driven straight through the forest and never looked back. But the sun was already going down, the snow was picking up, and I didn't want to crash on those icy back roads. So, like an idiot, I returned to cabin 4. It was the last night I'd ever spend there, and I don't think I was alone. I didn't unpack anything when I got back to cabin 4 that evening. I just sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on, clutching the room key in one hand and a fireplace poker in the other. Every creak outside made my heart race. The storm had started, just like Weller said it would. Thick sheets of snow blurred the window and the wind howled like it was alive, scraping branches across the roof like claws. But the worst part wasn't outside. It was the sound I kept hearing inside the cabin. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, overhead. There was no second floor. At first, I thought it might be hail or snow falling from a tree, but the rhythm didn't match. It was too slow, too human. 5 steps, a pause, then 5 more. I stood there frozen, eyes locked on the ceiling, mouth dry. I knew it made no sense. There was no loft, no attic. The ranger said all the cabins were single level. Then a voice whispered through the vent above the bed. "I saw you leave." I leapt off the mattress, stumbling backward until my shoulder hit the front door. My flashlight beam shook as I pointed it toward the vent. The metal cover vibrated ever so slightly, like someone had just pulled away from it. I didn't care anymore. I grabbed my pack, yanked open the door, and ran out into the storm. Snow whipped into my eyes, stinging like sand. I sprinted toward the ranger station, the only place with light. Halfway there, I turned to glance back. Cabin 3's front door was wide open, and someone was standing in the doorway. The figure didn't move, just watched me. Even through the blizzard, I could feel its eyes. I turned and ran faster than I ever had in my life. Weller opened the door before I even knocked. "What did you see?" he asked. I didn't answer, just stood there shaking, covered in snow, until I managed to whisper, "Someone's in that cabin." Weller didn't respond right away. He just stared at me, the lines on his face deepening. Then he turned and walked into the back room without a word. I looked around the office. Maps, radios, old photographs, a filing cabinet. One wall was covered in Polaroids, grainy photos of hikers and campers over the years. Some were smiling, others looked more candid. But something felt off. In every photo, the person was alone. No ranger beside them. No group shots. And none of them looked like they knew they were being photographed. When Weller returned, he handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a page from the check-in log, dated 3 years ago. My name was on it, my signature. Cabin 4. Same red key tag, but I'd never been here before this week. "I don't understand," I muttered. Weller just looked at me. "Sometimes people come out here and don't come back the same. The forest doesn't always let go." I felt my stomach drop. "You think I've been here before?" He nodded. "Or someone who looks like you has." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of the ranger station, under flickering fluorescent lights, gripping that paper like it was the only thing tying me to reality. At 3:12 a.m., the door creaked. "Open." Weller and I both froze. But no wind blew in. No snow. No footsteps, just silence. The door closed again, slowly, like someone had finished checking. We didn't speak. The next morning, Weller let me leave. He didn't say goodbye, just scribbled something in the log and handed me my driver's license, though I hadn't even realized I'd given it to him. As I drove down the winding path toward the highway, my tires skidding on the icy dirt, I glanced in the rear-view mirror. The ranger station was gone, not blocked by trees, not hidden by fog, just gone. No clearing, no cabin, no sign it had ever been there, only thick forest, untouched by man. I don't know where I stayed that week. I don't know who, or what, signed me out of that logbook. But sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up thinking I hear footsteps above my ceiling. And when I check my phone, there's always a new weather alert. Alert. Stay in your room. Do not exit. Hazard status, active. But the scariest part? It's always for a location in Alaska, even though I live thousands of miles away, and each one ends with the same chilling message, you haven't checked out. The ranger's voice on the radio crackled through the static with one line I still hear every time I close my eyes. You checked in 3 nights ago, sir, but our logs say you never left. That didn't make sense. I was standing right there at the trail station, holding the checkout slip in my hand. The pen I'd just used was still warm. The young ranger behind the counter looked at me like I was the ghost. I should have turned around then. I should have ignored the deal on the cabin. Should have trusted my gut when the first night didn't feel right. But I was already too deep in. And in Alaska, deep in means something else entirely. Trees that don't end. Air so still it muffles. Sound. A kind of isolation that feels alive. It started 3 days earlier. I'd booked a solo trip to clear my head after a rough divorce. I needed distance, peace, and no one calling or checking in. Alaska had always been my escape plan. Just a cabin, a trail map, and whatever I could carry. The ranger, who checked me in, was friendly enough, older, the type with a gray beard and calm eyes. He took one look at me and said, "First time?" "Yeah, hoping to get off the grid." He handed me a red clipboard and said, "Sign in, and if you're staying in the woods past 2 days, leave a radio. Sometimes things get weird up here." I laughed. Weird? People lose time, hear things, panic. Happens when you're too alone for too long. I should have taken it more seriously. The cabin was 12 miles from the ranger post, tucked between 2 peaks and barely visible through the spruce. The hike-in was beautiful. Streams frozen mid-rush, eagles overhead, a sky so wide it felt surreal. But something shifted when I got close, like the trees were leaning in, watching. I told myself it was just nerves. The first night I built a fire and sat by the window. No cell service, no radio, just me in the woods. But right around 1 a.m., I heard something. Not an animal, not wind. It was faint but rhythmic, like breathing. I froze. The sound was outside, then behind the cabin, then gone. I waited, gripping the axe by the fireplace. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. The next morning, I found tracks, human tracks. Bare feet, no shoes, just a trail around the cabin that ended by the back wall and disappeared. No return prints, no drag marks, just gone. I convinced myself someone had wandered through, maybe another hiker, maybe one of those survivalist types that don't like people. By the second night, the forest felt closer, heavier, like the trees were pressing in when I wasn't looking. The wind picked up around dusk, but I couldn't hear it. I could only feel it, pressing against the walls, under the floorboards, inside my chest. Then came the tapping. It started at the windows. Soft, deliberate. I counted them. 1, 2, pause, 3, then again. Always the same pattern. I got up, swung the flashlight beam across the porch, the tree line, nothing. But the pattern didn't stop. It just moved. One window to the next, circling, like something was walking the perimeter, tapping as it went. I stayed up all night again, lights on, fire roaring, but the cold inside the cabin never left. It wasn't from outside. It felt internal, like the cold was under my skin. The third morning, the door was wide open. I never heard it creak, never felt the air change. Just woke up on the floor by the hearth, every log in the fire burned down to ash, and the front door yawning open like it had been that way for hours. I stepped outside with the axe, but there were no tracks this time. Just snow, undisturbed, stretching in all directions. I packed my gear, ready to head back. I'd had enough, but something told me not to leave the usual trail. So I cut a path, straight through the woods toward the nearest trailhead. It took me 6 hours to find the ranger post again, but it wasn't the same one. The building looked older. Boards warped, paint flaked, windows cloudy with frost from the inside. It looked abandoned, but inside, there was a man behind the counter. He looked up when I came in and said, "You again?" "I'm checking out," I said, placing my form on the counter. "Cabin 14, 3 nights. He glanced at the logbook and paused. "Sir," he said slowly, "you checked in 3 nights ago, but our records say you never left." "I'm standing right here," I said, half laughing, half exhausted. He picked up the radio and called someone. "We got a returner, cabin 14, but logs say he's still inside." The voice on the other end responded, "Negative. No sign of movement at 14. Still looks occupied." Occupied? That's when I noticed it. Behind the desk, pinned to the corkboard, was a Polaroid, faded, curled at the edges. It was me, standing in the woods behind the cabin, staring directly at the lens. Only, I hadn't taken any photos, and I hadn't worn that jacket since my first night. I turned to the ranger. "Where'd you get this?" His face paled. "That was pinned there this morning." He slid it across the counter. "You said you were alone up there?" "I was." He leaned forward. "Then who's taking pictures of you at night?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because suddenly, I remembered something. The ranger asked again, "Who's taking pictures of you up there?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. My throat went dry, and my brain scrambled for something logical, something to anchor me. I pocketed the photo and stumbled out of the station into the snow, heart pounding, legs heavy. I needed air. I needed to get away from that building, away from the stifling heat and the smell of old wood and static radios. I didn't realize until I was halfway down the path that I'd left my gear inside. But I didn't care. My phone, useless, no signal, was still in my pocket. I opened the photo again, looking at the timestamp scribbled in fading ink on the bottom edge. 7 a.m. That was the exact time I'd heard the tapping on the glass. That's when something else occurred to me. The flash I saw, it came from behind me. I hadn't told anyone that, not even the ranger. But in the photo, I'm staring into the camera, as if I saw whoever was holding it. But I had turned toward the cabin when I saw that flash, toward the window. So how was I facing the camera? I started walking back up the trail, not even thinking. Some instinct in me said I needed to see the cabin again, needed to make sure it was still real, still there. Maybe I'd find prints. Maybe I'd find some explanation. Or maybe, I don't know. I just didn't want to be alone. It took longer than I remembered. The trees looked different, off. And no matter how far I walked, the sky above me didn't change. It stayed that dull, lifeless gray. No sun, no wind, no sound. About 4 hours in, I stopped at a clearing and dropped to my knees. The snow didn't feel cold anymore. It just felt wrong, too dry, too quiet. I sat there for maybe 15 minutes catching my breath when I heard it again. Click, like a camera shutter. I froze. My breath fogged the air in short bursts. I didn't move, didn't even turn my head, but I felt it, that same presence I felt the night before, watching me. I stood slowly and spun around, flashlight gripped tight in my hand. Nothing, no figure, no movement, just endless trees and silence. I pressed on. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun had begun to dip, though I never saw it once. Just a darker shade of gray above the tree line. The cabin looked untouched, not abandoned, not ransacked, just still. But when I opened the door, something was different. It was warmer inside, like someone had just been there. The fire had been relit, and on the floor by the hearth, placed neatly where I'd slept the first night, was another photo. Same Polaroid, style, same timestamp, different pose. This time, I was lying in my sleeping bag, eyes shut, but something was standing behind me in the dark. Not a person, not clearly a shape. Long, blurred, as if the shutter caught it mid-movement, but it was there, looming, watching. I backed out of the cabin and slammed the door shut. My body went into autopilot, feet crunching snow as I sprinted toward the side trail that led to the creek. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed out. But the deeper I ran, the quieter it got. And then I saw lights. At first I thought it was the ranger post again. But as I approached, I realized it was something else entirely. Another cabin, smaller, older, windows shuttered with metal, a radio antenna jutting from the roof like a skeletal finger. It wasn't on any of the maps. Circled around cautiously, and that's when I saw it. A trail cam, mounted to a tree, pointing at the entrance. It was still blinking, still powered, still recording. I yanked it off the trunk and popped the SD card. If there were answers, maybe they were on there. Inside the mystery cabin, it was empty. Just shelves. A cot, a wood stove, and one thing that made my blood run cold. A wall covered in Polaroids. Dozens of them. All different people. All in the same forest. Same style. Same timestamps. Every photo captured them alone, sleeping, staring, unaware they were being watched. And in the center was me, not once, but 4 times. Different poses, different nights. In one, I'm staring out the cabin window. In another, I'm standing by the fire, axe in hand. In the last one, I'm asleep on the floor, and in each one, that same shape was behind me. No face, no details, just a silhouette. Suddenly, I heard it again. Click. This time it came from behind me. I turned slowly. Empty doorway. But the trees beyond seemed closer now. Darker. I stepped forward, but my foot caught something on the floor. A notebook. Picked it up and flipped through the pages. All handwritten, all entries from different people. Each one started the same way. I thought I was alone. Some entries ended mid-sentence. Others were scratched out violently like the writer had, panicked. But one line, repeated over and over, stood out. It knows when you notice it. And just beneath that,